This story is titled, Dad Stole My Education Money for His New Family and Said, Good Luck in Life. My epic graduation speech made him regret everything. Hey Reddit, I was 19 when my life changed forever. Looking back now, I realize how simple everything was before that day. My name is Madison, and this is a story about how karma works in its own time. You don't need to help it along. Karma just needs time to do its thing. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. It was Saturday, and my mom was making her special French toast for breakfast. The kitchen was filled with the warm scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee. My dad was supposedly running some errands, but his empty chair at our breakfast table was the first red flag that something wasn't right. Mom was trying to sound casual while flipping another golden piece of French toast. He's been gone a while, she commented, her voice a little too controlled. I just shrugged, scrolling through my phone as I sat at the table. Just errands, same as always, I replied, not really paying attention. If only I had looked up and seen the worry lines creasing her forehead. Maybe I would have been better prepared for what was coming. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:23 a.m. I know the precise time because I checked my phone, annoyed at the interruption to our peaceful Saturday morning. I thought maybe Dad had forgotten his keys again. It wouldn't have been the first time, but it wasn't Dad. It was some courier guy standing on our porch with an envelope in his hand and a bored expression on his face. Mrs. Anderson? He asked my mom, holding out his tablet for a signature. I watched as Mom wiped her hands on her apron and signed the electronic pad. She looked confused as she took the envelope, but that confusion quickly transformed into something else entirely as she opened it and began to read. I'll never forget how the color drained from her face as she slowly sank into my dad's empty chair. Mom! I put my phone down, suddenly alert. What's wrong? She handed me the papers with shaking hands. Divorce papers. My father had served divorce papers while we were making French toast on a Saturday morning. Who does that? There has to be a mistake, I said, though the words felt hollow leaving my mouth. Deep down, I already knew. All the signs had been there. The late nights at work, the mysterious phone calls he'd taken in another room, the fact that he'd changed his phone password last month. I just hadn't wanted to see them. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from him. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'll explain everything soon. Soon, as it turned out, meant 3 days later at some hipster coffee shop downtown in Houston. And he didn't come alone. He brought her with him. Nicole, his personal assistant. She was barely 28, wearing some fancy ring that probably cost more than our monthly rent. I hated her on sight, though I knew rationally that this wasn't entirely her fault. Dad tried reaching for my hand across the table. Madison, honey, he began, his voice soft as if speaking to a wounded animal. I pulled my hand back instantly. This isn't how I wanted things to go, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Unexpected turns? My laugh sounded hollow, like an empty glass breaking against tile. Like emptying my college fund? Was that an unexpected turn too? I watched his face go pale. He hadn't expected me to know about that yet. How did you, he started. Mom checked the accounts, I cut him off. Every penny is gone, Dad. Every single penny. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. What happened to, I'll always take care of you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Nicole shifted uncomfortably in her chair as the tension between my father and me thickened the air around us. Thomas, maybe we should, she began, but I cut her off mid-sentence. No, let him explain, I said, my eyes never leaving my father's face. I want to hear how he justifies stealing his daughter's future. I didn't steal anything, my father replied, his voice rising slightly as if I was the one being unreasonable. That money was in my name. We needed it for our new start. Your new start, I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. You mean your new house? Your new wife? Your new baby? His head snapped up at that last part, genuine shock registering on his face. How did you... Instagram isn't private, Dad, I said, pulling out my phone and showing him Nicole's profile with its poorly concealed baby bump photos. Congratulations, by the way. Hope it was worth it. I stood up from my chair, the legs making a loud scraping noise against the floor. People at nearby tables turned to look, but I didn't even care anymore. Let them stare. Let them see what a father throwing away his daughter looks like. Madison, please. My father reached for me again, desperation creeping into his voice. We can figure something out. Maybe some student loans or community college first. Don't bother, I said, gathering my things. You've done enough. As I walked toward the door, I could hear Nicole's voice behind me, trying to comfort him. "She'll come around, Thomas. She just needs time." I stopped at the door and turned back one last time. My father was hunched over the table, his head in his hands, while Nicole rubbed his back. They looked like something out of a romantic movie, the couple overcoming obstacles together. It made me sick. "You know what's funny, Dad?" I called out, not caring who heard. "You always told me actions have consequences. Guess we'll both find out if that's true." I got home later that night and sat at my desk for hours, staring at the acceptance letter from my dream university. The one I couldn't afford anymore. University of Chicago. The prestigious school that had been my goal since sophomore year of high school. The reason I'd stayed up late studying while my friends went to parties. All for nothing. Mom found me there, still staring at the letter as midnight approached. She squeezed my shoulder gently, her eyes red-rimmed from her own crying. "We'll figure something out," she said with a forced smile. "We always do." I looked up at her and saw the strength in her eyes despite everything she'd been through. My mom, who just had her life shattered too, was still thinking about my future. "Yes, we will," I replied, determination hardening inside me. But not his way. I opened my laptop and started searching. Scholarships, grants, part-time jobs, anything that could help me get to Chicago without my father's money. I kept the acceptance letter right next to me, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as motivation for what I needed to achieve. My father thought he could break me by taking my future. Instead, he gave me something more valuable, the determination to succeed without him. I made myself a promise that night. I would graduate at the top of my class, and when I did, he'd realize exactly what his new start had cost him. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's about getting better, and I was about to get so much better. 3 months later, I was on my third cup of coffee in 2 hours, sitting in a booth at the diner where I worked the night shift. My friend Lily slid into the seat across from me, eyeing the scattered papers spread across the table. "You're going to vibrate right out of your shoes," she commented, nodding at my coffee cup. She wasn't wrong. "Can't help it," I replied, shuffling through a stack of scholarship applications. "These are due by midnight, and I still have a shift to finish." The diner job was just one of 3 I was juggling. Mornings at the university bookstore, afternoons tutoring high school students in math and science, and nights here serving endless coffee to tired truckers and cramming college students. Sleep had become a luxury I simply couldn't afford. "Let me help," Lily said, reaching for half of my scholarship applications. I'd met her during my first tutoring session. She was struggling with calculus, and I needed money. What started as a business arrangement had quickly grown into a genuine friendship. She'd become my biggest supporter through all of this. "You don't have to," I started to protest. "Shut up and let me help," she interrupted, already starting to read through one of the forms. "Besides, your handwriting looks like a drunk spider dipped in ink." I laughed despite my exhaustion. The bell above the diner door chimed, and I jumped up to serve the new customers. When I returned to our booth a few minutes later, Lily was frowning at her phone. "What's wrong?" I asked, noticing her expression. She hesitated before answering. "Your dad posted something about his new baby." My hand trembled slightly as I poured more coffee into my cup. The familiar ache in my chest returned, the one that appeared whenever I was reminded of my father's new life. "Let me guess," I said bitterly. "Another perfect family photo?" "Madison, it's fine," Lily tried to reassure me, but I cut her off quickly. "I'm too busy for a social media fairy tale anyway," I told her, though we both knew it was a lie. The truth was, every post still hurt like a fresh wound. Later that night, after my shift ended, I found myself alone in my small apartment, scrolling through my father's profile. There they were, Thomas, Nicole, and baby Olivia, all wearing matching winter sweaters. The caption read, "Nothing better than family time." I threw my phone across the room. The next morning, I dragged myself to the campus bookstore, fighting the exhaustion that had become my constant companion. My manager, David, took one look at me as I clocked in. "You look like death warmed over, kid," he said bluntly. "Thanks for the compliment," I muttered while stocking a shelf with overpriced textbooks. "Take a break," he said, his voice softening. "There's something I want to show you." David led me to his cramped office in the back of the store and pulled up the store's website on his ancient computer. "We're starting a scholarship program for student employees," he announced, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Full ride for one person. Applications open next week." My heart skipped a beat. "Full ride?" "Yep," he confirmed with a wink. "Between us, you're already at the top of my list. Just don't tell anyone I said that." For the first time in months, I felt hope flutter in my chest. But then I remembered all the other applications I'd submitted, all the rejection letters I'd received. "Thanks, David," I said, trying not to let my voice crack. "I'll definitely apply." That afternoon, during a tutoring session with a struggling sophomore, my phone kept buzzing with calls from an unknown number. I ignored it until the third call, then finally stepped out to answer. "Hello?" I said, annoyed at the interruption. "Madison, it's Dad." My throat tightened instantly. "I'm working," I said coldly. "I know, He paused. "I saw your scholarship applications, in my company. I wanted to tell you that I'm on the selection committee." I felt the blood drain from my face. Of course he was. Of course the universe would throw this particular curveball my way. "I can help," he offered, his voice eager. As if this one small gesture could make up for everything. "Like you helped with my college fund?" The words came out sharp enough to cut. "No thanks. I'd rather fail on my own than succeed because of you." I hung up and leaned against the wall, breathing hard, trying to compose myself. When I returned to my student, she looked concerned. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied through my teeth, forcing a smile. "Now, about that quadratic formula." A month later, I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, surrounded by bills and more application forms, when my laptop dinged with a new email. The subject line read, "University Application Status Update." My hands were shaking as I clicked it open. The first line made my heart stop. "Congratulations, we are pleased to offer you admission." I read it 3 times before it fully sank in. I'd gotten into my dream school. The one I'd been working toward before everything fell apart. I grabbed my phone immediately and called my mom first, my fingers trembling with excitement. "I got in!" I practically screamed when she answered. Her joy matched mine, her voice breaking with emotion on the other end of the line. "Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you," she exclaimed, and I could hear her starting to cry happy tears. Reality quickly tempered my excitement as I glanced back at the acceptance letter, specifically at the estimated cost that made my stomach churn. "I don't know how I'll afford it yet," I admitted quietly, "but I'll figure it out. I have to." "You will," she said firmly, with absolute conviction in her voice. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Madison." After hanging up with Mom, I sat looking at the acceptance letter glowing on my screen. The numbers next to estimated cost made me feel physically ill, but I refused to let fear win. I would work harder, sleep less, do whatever it took to make this happen. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Check your email. Did you get in?" I smiled and typed back, "I did. Time to make the impossible possible." Because that's what this was. Impossible, but necessary. Like climbing a mountain with my hands tied behind my back. But I'd rather climb that mountain than take the easy road my father had offered. Sometimes the hardest path leads exactly where you need to go. 3 months later, I stood outside my new dorm room, heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and pride. The door swung open to reveal my new roommate, a bubbly girl named Natalie, who threw open her arms like some enthusiastic game show host. "Welcome to Harrison Hall!" she exclaimed. "Home sweet home for the next year!" The dorm room was tiny with 2 narrow beds and desks crammed against opposite walls. To most people, it probably looked depressing, but to me, it was paradise. Proof that I had made it despite everything. "You don't have much stuff," Natalie observed as I unpacked my single suitcase. "I travel light," I replied with a shrug. There was no need to mention that traveling light wasn't exactly a choice when you're working 3 jobs just to pay tuition. "Well, you can borrow anything you need from me," she offered generously, gesturing to her overflowing closet that looked like an entire department store had exploded inside it. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a routine. Classes during the day, work-study job in the library at night, and weekends split between studying and an off-campus waitressing gig. Sleep became a distant memory, but my GPA stayed perfect. That was all that mattered. "You should join some clubs," Natalie suggested one evening, watching me highlight my textbooks for the 3rd time. "All work and no play makes Madison a dull girl." "Can't afford to be dull," I muttered without looking up. "Need to maintain my scholarship." "At least come to the business leaders meeting tomorrow," she insisted. "It's a great networking opportunity." She wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. "Plus, there's free pizza." Free food was my weakness, so I reluctantly agreed. That's where I met him. Marcus was giving a presentation about internship opportunities when our eyes met across the room. Later, as I was reaching for a slice of pizza, my first proper meal that day, he appeared beside me. "You're the one who actually took notes during my boring speech," he said with a grin. "It wasn't boring," I replied while grabbing a slice. though you might want to ease up on the corporate buzzwords. He laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to light up his whole face. Noted. I'm Marcus. Madison, I replied. We ended up talking long after the meeting ended, sitting on a bench outside the business building. He was smart, funny, and surprisingly easy to talk to. So why business? He asked curiously, after we'd covered topics ranging from favorite books to worst professors. I like knowing how things work, I explained. Money, markets, people, it's all connected. He raised an eyebrow. There's more to it than that. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a notification. Thomas Anderson has tagged you in a photo. My hand trembled as I opened it. There I was, maybe 5 years old, sitting on my dad's shoulders at a carnival, cotton candy in my hand, and the biggest smile on my face. His caption read, "Missing my firstborn today. #Throwback Thursday #family. Is everything." Are you okay? Marcus asked, concern in his voice. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just my father's latest attempt at public redemption, I said bitterly, showing him the post. The words spilled out before I could stop them. About the divorce, the stolen college fund, the new family. I hadn't meant to share all this with someone I'd just met, but there was something about Marcus that made it easy to talk. What a dick, he said simply when I finished my story. I laughed despite myself. Yeah, pretty much. My dad's not winning any awards either, he offered. Left when I was 12. Sends a birthday text sometimes if he remembers. We sat in comfortable silence then, two people understanding each other's wounds without needing more words. The next day, I was working my shift at the library, reshelving books in the quiet, dusty stacks, when I overheard two students talking nearby. Did you hear about the new alumni scholarship program? One of them asked. Yeah, full ride for students who demonstrate exceptional leadership and community impact, the other replied. Good luck with that. I froze with a book halfway to its shelf, my mind racing. An idea started forming, something dangerous and ambitious, but exactly what I needed. That evening, I researched everything I could find about starting scholarship funds. Between classes the next day, I drafted proposals and made lists of potential donors, my excitement growing with each new idea. You're plotting something, Natalie said, watching me scribble frantically in my notebook during lunch. I know that look. Maybe, I replied with a mysterious smile. But not yet, needs to be perfect. My phone buzzed again. Another notification from my father. This time, it was a photo of baby Olivia taking her first steps, the comments section full of congratulations and heart emojis from friends and family I once thought were mine too. You don't have to look, Marcus said, suddenly appearing behind me. He'd started sitting with us at lunch, becoming a regular part of our little group. I know, I said, closing the app quickly. But sometimes I need the reminder. Reminder of what? He asked. Of why I'm doing this. All of it. I gestured to my notebooks full of plans. Success is the best revenge, right? Revenge is overrated, he said carefully, his eyes thoughtful. But success, that's forever. Later that night, as I was closing up the library, I found a note slipped into my bag. It was from Marcus. Whatever you're planning, I'm in. Just say the word. I smiled while tucking the note into my planner. Pieces were falling into place, slowly but surely. My dad thought he could write me out of his story, replace me with his perfect new family. But I was writing my own story now. And it was going to have one hell of a plot twist. 3 weeks later, I was slumped over a textbook in the library, having fallen asleep while studying. The next thing I knew, someone was calling my name. Madison! Madison, wake up! I jerked awake suddenly, my face pressed against the pages, a small puddle of drool under my cheek. Marcus was standing over me, concern written all over his face. What time is it? I mumbled while wiping my chin. 3:38 a.m., he answered. I was walking back from the computer lab and saw the light on in here. He sat down across from me, his eyes taking in the scattered papers, empty coffee cups, and my obviously exhausted state. This is the third time this week I've found you like this, he said softly. I have a midterm tomorrow, I explained while straightening my papers, and a presentation for business ethics, and a double shift at the diner, and you're going to crash and burn if you keep this up, he interrupted, closing my textbook firmly. Come on, I'm walking you home. The October air was crisp as we crossed the empty campus. My legs felt like lead, and even keeping my eyes open was a struggle. Talk to me, Marcus said suddenly, breaking the silence. Why? Because you're about to face plant into the sidewalk, and talking will keep you awake. I was too tired to argue. I have this recurring dream, I began slowly. I'm back at my old house before everything fell apart. Dad's making his famous French toast. My voice caught in my throat. I hadn't meant to talk about this, especially not with him. Go on, he encouraged softly. In the dream, I always try to warn him. Tell him not to leave, not to throw everything away. But when I open my mouth, no sound comes out. Then I watch him walk away, over and over. We reached my dorm, but neither of us moved to go inside. Want to know what I think? Marcus asked quietly. What? I think you're still trying to save him, but he's not the one who needs saving. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. Your father called. Says he's coming to campus next week for some alumni event. Wanted you to know. The exhaustion vanished instantly, replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. Bad news? Marcus asked, watching my face. My father's coming here next week, I said, my hand starting to shake. With his new family. Hey. Marcus grabbed my shoulders gently. Look at me. You don't have to see him. Yes, I do, I whispered. Because if I hide, he wins, and I'm done letting him win. The next morning, I could barely focus in class. Professor Carter had to call my name twice during our business ethics discussion. Miss Anderson, she said, a hint of impatience in her voice. Your thoughts on ethical leadership? Sorry, I said, straightening in my seat. I was just thinking about how ethics often conflict with personal gain, and how leaders justify their choices. Interesting perspective, she nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps you could expand on that in your final paper. After class, Natalie cornered me in the hallway. Okay, spill, she demanded. What's going on? You're acting weird. My father's coming to campus for some alumni event next week, I explained, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. The fall alumni mixer, she said, pulling out her phone. Wait, I saw something about that. They're announcing new scholarship initiatives. My heart stopped dead in my chest. Of course he would be there, probably presenting some generous donation, playing the role of successful businessman and philanthropist. The perfect image for his perfect new life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I ended up in the 24-hour campus coffee shop, staring at old family photos on my laptop. I found one from my 15th birthday, the last one before he left. We were both smiling at the camera, his arm around my shoulders. We looked happy. Was it all fake even then? You look like him. I slammed my laptop shut, startled by the voice. Marcus was standing there, holding 2 coffee cups. Sorry, he said, sliding one toward me. Didn't mean to sneak up. I don't look like him, I said sharply, then softened my tone. Sorry, I'm just scared. Angry, he corrected. And tired. So damn tired. Of what? Of pretending I'm okay, I admitted. Of working 3 jobs. Of maintaining perfect grades. Of watching him play happy families on Instagram. I gestured around at my surroundings. The empty coffee shop, my stack of textbooks, the dark circles I knew were under my eyes. All of it. Marcus stayed quiet for a moment, studying me. You know what's funny? He finally said. He probably thinks he's hurting you by showing off his new life. But look at you. Top of our class, working your ass off, building something real. You're everything he's pretending to be. I looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time that night. Why are you here, Marcus? It's 4 a.m. He smiled slightly. Because sometimes people need someone to remind them how strong they are, even if it's at 4 a.m. in a coffee shop. The sun was starting to rise when we finally left, casting long shadows across the empty campus. In a week, my father would walk these same paths, showing off his new family. But this was my territory now. I was done being a ghost in his perfect new life. The day of the alumni mixer arrived with a cruel twist of fate. My manager at the diner called at 6 a.m. Madison, we're letting you go, she said without preamble. The owner's nephew needs a job. I sat on my bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her ramble about budget cuts and family obligations. All I could think about was the rent due next week. Thanks for the opportunity, I said mechanically before hanging up. Natalie found me still sitting there an hour later, staring at the wall. Earth to Madison, she said, waving her hand in front of my face. You're going to be late for... She stopped, noticing my expression. What's wrong? Lost my job at the diner, I said, forcing myself to stand. But it's fine. I'll figure something out. It's not fine, she insisted. You need that money. What I need is to get through today without falling apart, I replied, grabbing my blazer, the only one I owned, bought secondhand for interviews. The alumni mixer started at noon. The business building had been completely transformed. Elegant buffet tables lined all the walls, and well-dressed alumni mingled with nervous students. I scanned the room, my heart pounding against my ribs. "There," Natalie whispered, nudging me. "By the podium." And then I saw him, my father, standing in an expensive suit that probably cost more than all my possessions combined. Nicole was beside him in a designer dress, and little Olivia, now a toddler, was clinging to his leg. They looked like the perfect family from a magazine ad. "Madison!" Professor Carter appeared suddenly at my side. "I'm so glad you came. There's someone I'd like you to meet." She started leading me toward the podium, toward them. "Professor, I tried to protest, but it was too late. "Thomas," she called out. "This is Madison, one of our top students. She's actually working on a fascinating proposal about ethical leadership." My father turned, and our eyes met for the first time in years. He paled slightly, his perfect composure cracking. "Madison," he said my name softly. You've grown up." "That tends to happen," I replied coldly. "Time passes, children grow, trust funds disappear." Professor Carter's smile faltered as she sensed the tension. Nicole shifted uncomfortably beside my father. "Perhaps this isn't the best time," she murmured. My father started to speak, but little Olivia looked up at me with curious eyes. "Who's that, Daddy?" she asked innocently. The question hung in the air like smoke. I watched my father struggle, saw the moment he chose the coward's way out. "Just one of our students, sweetheart," he said, patting her head. Something inside me snapped. "Actually," I said, loud enough for the nearby groups to hear, "I'm your sister, the one Daddy doesn't talk about." The silence that followed was deafening. Nicole quickly scooped up Olivia, murmuring something about finding the bathroom. "Madison, please!" my father hissed. "This isn't the place!" "When is the place?" I demanded quietly. "When you're posting perfect family photos? Or when you're announcing scholarships to prove what a generous man you are?" "You don't understand!" "I understand perfectly," I cut him off. "You traded your first family for a newer model. But here's what you don't understand. I'm not just surviving without you. I'm thriving." Professor Carter touched my arm gently. "Madison, perhaps we should step outside." "No need," I said, straightening my second-hand blazer. "I have a class to prepare for. Unlike some people, I actually earn what I have." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "I can help you," he said quietly. "I know you lost your job. I still have connections." I spun back around. "How did you know about my job?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I keep tabs on you." "Tabs?" I laughed bitterly. "You spy on me, but you can't claim me as your daughter. That's rich, even for you." Marcus appeared at my side as if summoned by my distress. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his eyes moving between us. "Perfect," I said with a steady voice, despite my trembling hands. "I was just leaving." As I walked away, I heard my father call after me, "Madison, wait!" I kept walking, out of the building across the quad, until my legs gave out near the library steps. Marcus sat beside me without a word. "I had this whole plan," I finally said, "to show him how well I was doing, to prove him wrong. Instead, I lost my job and made a scene at a university event." "You didn't make a scene," Marcus argued. "You stood up for yourself. There's a difference." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The numbers stared back, mocking my claims of independence. "I can't afford to lose that job," I whispered. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Remember that scholarship initiative you were researching?" I looked up at him. "What about it?" "Maybe it's time to stop planning and start doing," he suggested. "Turn this setback into something bigger." For the first time that day, I felt a spark of hope. "You really think we could?" He grinned. "I think you could do anything, especially if it involves proving someone wrong." I stood up and brushed off my blazer. My father might have won today's battle, but the war wasn't over. Not even close. A week later, I found myself standing in Professor Carter's office, presenting the idea that had consumed my every waking moment since the disastrous mixer. "The Resilient Scholarship Fund," I announced with all the confidence I could muster. "For students who've lost financial support due to family abandonment." She leaned forward in her chair, looking intrigued. "Go on." "I've already spoken with 10 other students in similar situations," I explained, sliding her my meticulously prepared proposal. "We've secured preliminary pledges from 3 local businesses and Marcus's father's law firm, which is willing to handle the legal paperwork pro bono." "To spite his own father," Marcus added from the seat beside me, a hint of mischief in his smile. "Which makes it even better." Professor Carter flipped through the pages, her expression thoughtful. "Starting a scholarship fund isn't easy," she warned. "You'll need substantial backing. That's why we're here," I said firmly. "We need faculty support to present this to the board." She studied me carefully, her eyes searching mine. This wouldn't have anything to do with your father's appearance at the mixer less than a month ago? It has everything to do with it, I admitted openly. But not in the way you think. This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no other student has to choose between their education and their dignity. She nodded slowly, her decision made. The board meets next week. I'll present it myself. Walking out of her office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Marcus bumped my shoulder playfully. See? Told you she'd help. We're not there yet, I reminded him. The board still has to… Madison! Natalie came running across the quad, waving her phone frantically. Check your email now! I pulled out my phone, confused by her urgency. The newest email in my inbox made my heart stop. Congratulations. Based on your outstanding academic performance, you have been selected as this year's valedictorian. Holy shit, Marcus breathed, reading over my shoulder. This changes everything. The scholarship announcement, I whispered excitedly, the pieces falling into place. We can do it at graduation, in front of everyone. Natalie grinned widely. Including your father. Will he even come? Marcus asked carefully. Oh, he'll come, I said with certainty. He won't be able to resist showing off his perfect family at his alma mater's graduation ceremony. The next week passed in a blur of meetings and preparations. The board approved our scholarship proposal with unprecedented enthusiasm, especially after learning about my valedictorian status. Your speech, Professor Carter advised during one planning session, needs to be powerful but professional. No direct accusations. I know, I assured her confidently. Trust me, I've been planning this longer than you think. That night, while working on my speech in the library, I got an unexpected text from Nicole. Can we meet, please? It's important. I stared at my phone for a long time before finally responding. Tomorrow, campus coffee shop, 2 p.m. She was already there when I arrived, nervously stirring a latte. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. I know you probably hate me. I don't hate you, I interrupted firmly. I nothing you, there's a difference. She flinched at my words but pressed on. Fair enough. Look, your father, he doesn't know I'm here, but he's been different since the mixer. Distant. Sad. Guilty. You mean guilty, I corrected her. And that's not my problem. He wants to make things right, she insisted. By throwing money at me now? I stood up quickly, my chair scraping against the floor. Tell him to save it for his next family. Madison, wait, she grabbed my arm. He's coming to graduation. He wants to support you. I pulled away from her grip. He's coming to maintain his image. But don't worry, I'll give him a speech he'll never forget. The next few weeks flew by. My speech went through countless revisions, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact. Marcus and Natalie helped me practice until I could deliver it in my sleep. The day before graduation, I received another text, this time from my father. Proud of you, princess. Can't wait for tomorrow. I showed it to Marcus during our final rehearsal. You okay? He asked, concern in his eyes. You know what's funny? I stared at the message. A year ago, these words would have meant everything. Now they just feel empty. Maybe because you don't need his validation anymore, Marcus suggested. I looked up at him. This friend who had become so much more over the past year. When did you get so wise? He grinned. Probably around the same time you got so strong. That night, I stood in front of my mirror, practicing one last time. My graduation robe hung on my door, waiting for tomorrow. My phone buzzed with messages from Mom, from Lily, from countless well-wishers. But all I could think about was the moment I'd step up to that podium, the moment I'd look out at the crowd and see my father's face. The moment he'd realize that his biggest mistake wasn't leaving us, it was underestimating me. Because tomorrow wasn't just about graduation. It was about transformation. I was finally ready to spread my wings and soar. The auditorium was buzzing with excitement when I arrived on graduation day. Standing backstage, I adjusted my cap for the 100th time, my heart racing. Through a gap in the curtain, I could see the crowd filing in. Proud parents, excited siblings, beaming grandparents, all there to celebrate their graduates. They're here, Natalie whispered, peeking through the gap. Row D, right side. I didn't need to look to know who she meant. I could feel my father's presence like a weight in the room. You've got this. Marcus appeared beside me, already in his graduation robe. Just breathe. Ladies and gentlemen, the dean's voice boomed through the speakers, please welcome this year's graduating class. We marched into the familiar strains of Pomp and Circumstance, a sea of black robes and nervous smiles. As we crossed the stage to take our places at the front, I caught a glimpse of them. My father in an expensive suit, Nicole holding Olivia on her lap. My mom sat on the opposite side of the auditorium, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The dean's welcome speech passed in a blur, and then the moment arrived. "And now," he announced, "it gives me great pleasure to introduce this year's valedictorian, a student who maintained perfect grades while working multiple jobs and who has already made significant contributions to our university community, Madison Anderson." Applause thundered as I approached the podium. My hands trembled slightly as I arranged my notes, but my voice was steady when I began. "4 years ago, I learned a valuable lesson about family," I started, my eyes scanning the crowd. "I learned that sometimes the people who should support you most are the ones who let you down the hardest." The room grew quiet. In the third row, my father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I stood in my kitchen one Saturday morning, watching my college fund disappear along with my dreams of higher education. I continued. But that moment taught me something crucial. Our greatest setbacks can become our strongest motivations. I paused, letting my words sink in before continuing. To my fellow graduates, we all have our stories of struggle. Some of us worked 3 jobs while studying. Some of us missed sleep, missed parties, missed the typical college experience because we were too busy surviving. But we're here. We made it. I saw heads nodding throughout the audience, tears glistening on several faces as my words resonated with their own struggles. "And that brings me to an announcement," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. "Today, with the support of our faculty and local businesses, I'm proud to introduce the Resilient Scholarship Fund." I took a deep breath before delivering the line I'd rehearsed so many times. "This fund will provide full tuition for students who have lost financial support due to family abandonment." A murmur rippled through the crowd. My father's face had gone pale, his perfect composure crumbling. "Because here's what I learned," I said, my voice growing stronger. "When someone tries to clip your wings, you don't just learn to fly, you learn to soar. And then you build a nest for others who need shelter." I locked eyes with my father for the first time. "To the parent who taught me this lesson by example," I said clearly, "thank you. Your actions showed me exactly who I didn't want to become." I could see him shrinking in his seat, Nicole gripping his arm tightly. "And to my mother who worked double shifts to keep food on our table while I chased my dreams, you taught me what real strength looks like." My mom was openly crying now, surrounded by supportive strangers passing tissues. "The first recipient of the Resilient Scholarship has already been selected," I announced. "A brilliant young woman whose father emptied her college fund to start a new family." I paused deliberately. "Sound familiar, Dad?" The auditorium fell dead silent. I could see Nicole gripping my father's arm while he stared at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. "But this isn't about revenge," I clarified. "It's about transformation, about taking pain and turning it into purpose, about ensuring no other student has to choose between their education and dignity." I straightened my shoulders, my voice growing even stronger as I delivered the final part of my speech. "So to my fellow graduates, I say this. Your struggles don't define you, your response to them does. And sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better." The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. People were standing, cheering and wiping tears from their eyes. Through it all, I kept my eyes on my father, watching as he finally looked up to meet my gaze. In that moment, I saw everything. His shame, his regret, his realization of what he had thrown away. But more importantly, I saw myself clearly for the first time. Strong, resilient, whole. As I returned to my seat, Natalie squeezed my hand. She was crying and grinning at the same time. "That was incredible," she whispered. But it wasn't over yet. As the ceremony continued, I watched my father stand and quietly leave his seat, Nicole calling after him in a hushed voice. He walked out of the auditorium, shoulders slumped, leaving his perfect family behind. Sometimes karma doesn't need your help. Sometimes all it needs is a microphone and the truth. After the ceremony, the reception hall was buzzing with post-graduation energy. I stood near the scholarship information table, accepting congratulations and answering questions from interested students. My speech had sparked something. Dozens of students had already signed up for information about next semester's applications. "Madison?" A small voice made me turn. Olivia stood there in her pink dress, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Are you really my sister?" she asked, her innocent eyes wide with curiosity. I knelt down to her level, my heart twisting unexpectedly. "Yes, I am," I told her softly. "Why didn't Daddy tell me?" she asked, confusion evident on her little face. Before I could answer, Nicole appeared, looking flustered. "Olivia, I told you to stay with me," she scolded gently before noticing me. "Oh, Madison, I'm sorry, she just..." It's okay, I said, standing up slowly. She deserves answers, more than anyone. He left, Nicole said quietly. After your speech, I don't know where he went. That seems to be his specialty, I replied. But I was surprised to find the bitterness I'd carried for so long had dulled. My mom approached then, wrapping me in a tight hug. I am so proud of you, baby girl, she whispered. So proud. Mrs. Anderson, Nicole started speaking awkwardly, clearly unsure what to say. Mom cut her off gently. What's done is done. What matters now is doing better. Olivia tugged at my graduation robe, her eyes hopeful. Will you come to my ballet recital next week? I'm going to be a butterfly. Such a simple request, but it brought tears to my eyes. I'd love to, I told her. Really? Nicole looked surprised. Even after everything? She's innocent in all this, I said softly. And maybe it's time to break the cycle. Professor Carter interrupted, informing me that local media wanted interviews about the scholarship fund. As I spoke with reporters, I noticed Marcus talking intently with Nicole, showing her something on his phone. Later, as the crowd thinned, he pulled me aside. Your father's at Riverside Park, he said. Nicole's been tracking his phone. Apparently he does this sometimes, just sits there for hours. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my emotions churning. Because you're not done yet, he said simply. And you know it. I found my father exactly where Marcus said he would be, sitting on a bench by the duck pond. He looked smaller somehow, older and diminished. The ducks haven't changed, I said as I sat beside him. They still beg for bread even though there are signs everywhere saying not to feed them. He jumped slightly at my voice, then gave a weak laugh. You remember coming here every Saturday after French toast? I nodded slowly. Until you decided French toast wasn't enough anymore. Madison, Let me finish, I cut him off. What you did was unforgivable. Not just leaving, but stealing my future, making me feel worthless, replacing me with a new family. I know, he whispered, his voice breaking. But here's the thing, I continued. I'm not worthless. I proved that today. And that little girl, your daughter, she deserves better than a father who runs away when things get hard. He looked at me then, tears in his eyes. How did you become so strong? By having no choice, I answered honestly. But strength isn't enough anymore. I want peace, not for you, for me. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done carrying this anger. Done letting your choices define my life. And done pretending Olivia isn't my sister just because you're my father. I mean I'm going to her ballet recital next week, I told him. I mean I'm going to be the big sister she deserves. I stood up, brushing off my graduation robe. The scholarship fund's first board meeting is next month. You're welcome to attend, as a donor or as my father. Your choice. As I walked away, he called out, Madison, thank you! Not for forgiving me, but for becoming someone I wish I had the courage to be. I didn't turn around, but I smiled slightly. Sometimes closure doesn't look like you expect it to. Back at the reception, Marcus was waiting with Natalie and my mom. Olivia had fallen asleep in Mom's lap, still clutching her stuffed rabbit. Nicole hovered uncertainly nearby, looking out of place, but determined to stay. You okay? Marcus asked softly as I approached. Better than okay, I replied with a genuine smile. I'm free. I looked around at these people, my chosen family, my half-sister, even Nicole, and realized something profound. Sometimes family isn't about who shares your blood, but who shares your journey. My father might never become the dad I deserved, but I'd become the person I needed to be. And maybe that was the point all along. The scholarship fund would help others find their strength too. And me? I was ready for whatever came next. Not as someone's daughter or sister or victim, but as myself. Just Madison. And that was more than enough. Looking at sleeping Olivia, I realized something else. Sometimes healing comes in unexpected ways, through unexpected people. Maybe the real victory isn't in proving someone wrong, but in growing strong enough to write your own story. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities, no longer shadowed by what was taken, but brightened by what I'd built. Marcus slipped his hand into mine, Natalie beaming beside us, Mom wiping away fresh tears, Nicole looking on with newfound respect. In this moment, everything came full circle. The French toast mornings, the empty chair, the lost college fund, all had led here. To this moment where I wasn't just surviving, but thriving. Not just getting by, but soaring. Tomorrow I would go to a ballet recital and watch my little sister be a butterfly. I would start building bridges instead of walls. Next month, the first scholarship recipient would get their letter, just like I got mine all those years ago. But their story would be different because someone chose to turn pain into purpose, chose to break the cycle, chose to build something new. That's the thing about resilience. It's not just about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward, taking what broke you and using it to build others up. Looking at my mismatched family, I realized we were all part of something bigger now. A story of redemption, not just mine, but maybe his too if he chose it. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave the door open, even after it's been slammed in your face. At the end of the day, standing in the empty reception hall with my graduation robe still on, I thought about that morning years ago when my world fell apart over French toast. I never could have imagined this would be the ending. But maybe the best stories are ones we couldn't plan. Ones that write themselves through our choices, our strength, our resilience. Walking out into the evening air, I felt lighter than ever before. Because I finally understood. Sometimes losing everything is just the universe's way of making room for something better. And sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with a breaking, end with a rebuilding, and change everything in between. I guess karma really doesn't need help. Just time and maybe, just maybe, a little grace too.